What happens when playing television's most famous lover becomes your life's greatest burden? At 78 years old, Anthony Geary sits in a modest apartment in Amsterdam, thousands of miles from Hollywood, married to a man most of America never knew existed. The actor who once commanded 30 million viewers for a single episode now avoids cameras entirely. This isn't a story about fading glory or forgotten fame. This is about a man who achieved everything the entertainment industry promises only to discover it came with a price he never agreed to pay. For nearly 4 decades, Anthony Geary was Luke Spencer, the bad boy of General Hospital who became daytime television's most unlikely romantic hero. But behind the cameras, Geary was fighting a very different battle, one against typecasting, against an industry that refused to see him as anything other than the character he played, and ultimately against the very success that made him famous. This is the story of how America's most awarded soap opera actor became one of its most mysterious figures, and why he chose exile over encore. The foundation of privacy. Anthony Geary was born on May 29, 1947, in Colville, Utah, a town so small it barely registers on most maps. With a population hovering around 1,500 people, Colville was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which perhaps explains why Geary later became so protective of his privacy. His father, Russell Dean Geary, was a contractor who built his business with his bare hands, working construction jobs around Summit County. His mother, Dana, was a homemaker who provided the emotional foundation for their Mormon household. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints shaped Geary's early worldview in ways that would follow him throughout his career. Mormon culture emphasizes modesty, discretion, and traditional family values, principles that would later clash dramatically with Hollywood's appetite for publicity and personal revelation. While other actors courted fame, Geary instinctively recoiled from it. The spotlight wasn't salvation, it was something to be endured. Even as a child, Geary was drawn to the craft of acting rather than its glamour. He would watch movies not for entertainment but for education, taking notes on performances, studying the work of character actors who disappeared into their roles. At North Summit High School, he naturally gravitated toward drama, landing lead roles not through aggressive self-promotion, but through undeniable talent. When the University of Utah offered him a drama scholarship, it felt like destiny rather than luck, a path out of small-town Utah and into a larger world of artistic possibility. The controversial birth of Luke Spencer. In 1978, Anthony Geary signed what he thought was a temporary contract with General Hospital. 13 weeks playing a hitman named Luke Spencer, easy money, quick work, then on to something more substantial. The character was written as irredeemably dark, a criminal who commits rape during what the show initially tried to frame as seduction. By today's standards, it's shocking. Even by 1978 standards, it was controversial. The storyline was actually a desperate move by a dying show. General Hospital was hemorrhaging viewers and facing cancellation. The writers, led by Pat Falcon Smith, created the Luke and Laura story as a last-ditch attempt to generate buzz. Luke rapes Laura at a campus disco to the soundtrack of Herb Alpert's Rise, a scene that would become one of the most infamous moments in soap opera history. What nobody expected was Anthony Geary's performance. Instead of playing Luke as a one-dimensional villain, Geary brought layers of psychological complexity to the role. He showed Luke's guilt, his self-hatred, his recognition of his own monstrosity. When Luke looked in the mirror, viewers saw a man disgusted with himself, and somehow that made him human rather than simply evil. The audience response was immediate and unprecedented. Fans didn't just hate Luke, they were fascinated by him. Hate mail poured in, but so did love letters. Critics condemned the storyline, but viewers couldn't look away. General Hospital's ratings began climbing for the first time in years. What was supposed to be a 13-week arc stretched into months, then years, as writers scrambled to understand what they had created. Geary found himself in an impossible position. The role that was saving his career was also potentially destroying it. He was playing a rapist that audiences were beginning to root for, a development that troubled him deeply. In interviews from that era, he expressed discomfort with the storyline's implications, while acknowledging its dramatic power. He wasn't just acting Luke Spencer, he was navigating the moral complexities of portraying irredeemable behavior in a way that somehow demanded redemption. The cultural phenomenon. By 1981, something extraordinary had happened. Luke and Laura had evolved from controversial storyline to cultural phenomenon. The show's writers had carefully crafted Luke's journey from villain to anti-hero to reluctant romantic lead. Laura's forgiveness of Luke, initially criticized as Stockholm Syndrome by feminist groups, was written as a complex emotional evolution rather than simple victimization. The Luke and Laura wedding, broadcast on November 16th and 17th, 1981, drew over 30 million viewers. To put that in perspective, it outperformed most primetime shows and remains the highest-rated soap opera episode in television history. Elizabeth Taylor guest starred as Helena Cassadine, adding Hollywood glamour to daytime drama. The event was covered by mainstream news outlets as a cultural moment, rather than mere entertainment. But for Anthony Geary, the wedding's massive success was both triumph and trap. Luke and Laura had become more than characters. They were cultural icons. The show received thousands of letters addressed not to the actors, but to Luke and Laura directly, as if they were real people living real lives. Geary realized he had created something that transcended performance. He had become Luke Spencer in the public consciousness, and Luke Spencer had become him. The success brought opportunities, but they were always variations on the same theme. Film roles came his way, but directors saw him only as the soap actor, capable of playing variations of Luke rather than entirely different characters. Oliver Stone famously pigeonholed him based solely on his daytime television work. Even when Geary actively sought roles that would distance him from General Hospital, like the eccentric scientist Philo in Weird Al Yankovic's UHF, the industry kept pulling him back to the character that made him famous. The Emmy dynasty and its burden. Anthony Geary's 8 daytime Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series, won in 1982, 1999, 2000, 2004, 2006, 2008, 2012, and 2015, represent an unprecedented achievement in television history. No other actor has even come close to this level of recognition in daytime drama. Each win was deserved, reflecting consistently excellent work over nearly 4 decades. But with each Emmy came another chain linking him to Luke Spencer. The awards weren't celebrating Anthony Geary's range as an actor, they were honoring his portrayal of a single character. While other actors used soap operas as stepping stones to primetime or film careers, Geary found himself becoming more entrenched with each accolade. He was the best at playing Luke Spencer, which paradoxically made it harder for anyone to imagine him as anyone else. In acceptance speeches from his later Emmy wins, Geary began expressing subtle frustration with his situation. He would thank the writers and producers while also making pointed comments about the challenges of long-term character work. Industry insiders understood what he was really saying. He was grateful for the recognition, but exhausted by the repetition. The Emmys also increased media attention at a time when Geary was becoming increasingly private. Each award ceremony brought interview requests, photo shoots, and public appearances that felt increasingly uncomfortable for someone who had never courted fame. He began declining most media opportunities, appearing only when contractually obligated. This reclusiveness only made the media more curious about his personal life. The hidden struggles. Behind the scenes, Anthony Geary was fighting battles that most fans never knew existed. The physical demands of soap opera production, 12-hour days, multiple episodes filmed per week, decades of stage combat and dramatic physical scenes took a severe toll on his body. By the 2010s, he was dealing with chronic back problems that required surgery and extensive physical therapy. In 2014, Geary had to take extended time off from General Hospital for back surgery. The operation was successful, but the recovery was grueling. For an actor whose physical presence was crucial to his character's appeal, the injury was particularly devastating. He returned to work, but colleagues noticed changes in his energy and movement. The man who had once commanded every scene with dynamic physicality was now carefully managing his movements to avoid pain. The psychological toll was equally significant. Geary had spent nearly 4 decades playing a character whose complexity kept him engaged, but the repetitive nature of soap opera storytelling meant revisiting the same emotional territory repeatedly. Luke's relationships, traumas, and conflicts were explored, resolved, and then recycled in new configurations. For an actor who valued artistic growth, this cyclical storytelling became increasingly frustrating. More challenging was the public's inability to separate Anthony Geary from Luke Spencer. Fan encounters were often uncomfortable, with viewers addressing him as Luke or expecting him to display Luke's characteristics in real life. Geary was naturally introverted and intellectual. He loved literature, especially Shakespeare, and preferred quiet evenings to Hollywood parties. But fans expected the charismatic, larger-than-life presence they saw on screen. The secret life. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Anthony Geary's story is how successfully he kept his personal life private for over 3 decades. In an era of tabloid journalism and invasive paparazzi, Geary managed to maintain a long-term relationship that remained completely unknown to the public until very recently. Claudio Gama entered Geary's life in the early 1990s, around the time the actor was struggling with his career's direction. They met in Amsterdam during one of Geary's attempts to distance himself from Hollywood and explore life outside the entertainment industry. Gama, who works in a field far removed from show business, offered Geary something he had rarely experienced: a relationship completely separate from his public persona. Their relationship developed slowly and quietly. Gama never sought publicity or attempted to capitalize on his connection to a famous actor. Instead, he provided Geary with the stability and normalcy that had been missing from his life. They traveled together, with Gama often accompanying Geary on European vacations that the actor used to decompress from the pressures of General Hospital. The decision to keep their relationship private wasn't about shame or fear. It was about preservation. Geary had watched other celebrities' relationships become public property, dissected by media and fans until the personal became performance. By keeping his life with Gama separate from his professional identity, he maintained one space that remained genuinely his own. In 2019, they quietly married in Amsterdam. No media coverage, no celebrity guests, no publicity. It was a private ceremony that reflected their private relationship. Significant to them, invisible to the world that knew Anthony Geary only as Luke Spencer. The relationship only became public knowledge in 2025, when Gama posted photos on social media celebrating their 6th wedding anniversary. The images showed 2 men in their 70s, comfortable and happy in a modest European apartment, surrounded by books and the simple pleasures of a life lived away from cameras. The final chapter, Anthony Geary's departure from General Hospital in July 2015, was characteristic of his approach to fame: quiet, definitive, and on his own terms. There was no farewell tour, no publicity campaign, no tearful goodbye interviews. He simply finished his final scenes and walked away from the character that had defined his career for 37 years. The decision to retire wasn't sudden. Geary had been contemplating his exit for years, waiting for the right storyline and the right moment. His final Emmy win in 2015 for playing Luke's alternate personality, Fluke, felt like the appropriate capstone to his career. He had pushed the character into new psychological territory even in his final year, proving that his commitment to the craft never wavered. Since retiring, Geary has refused all offers to return, even for special episodes or anniversary celebrations. When General Hospital invited him back for brief appearances, he politely declined. This isn't about bitter feelings or contractual disputes. It's about a man who understands that some chapters need to end completely in order for new ones to begin. Today, Anthony Geary lives in Amsterdam with Claudio Gama, far from the entertainment industry that made him famous. They share a small apartment filled with books, cook together, and live the quiet life that Geary always craved but could never fully embrace while working. He reads voraciously, writes occasionally, and seems genuinely content with anonymity. The entertainment industry continues to court him, but Geary has no interest in comebacks or retrospectives. He gave 4 decades to Luke Spencer and Luke Spencer to the world. Now, finally, Anthony Geary belongs to himself. His story raises profound questions about fame, artistic fulfillment, and the price of iconic success. In a culture that equates visibility with value, Geary's choice of invisibility feels almost radical. He achieved everything the entertainment industry promises: awards, recognition, financial security, cultural impact, and then walked away from it all in search of something more precious: the freedom to be himself, privately and completely. At 78, Anthony Geary has found what eluded him for most of his career: a life where he is known and loved not as a character, but as a person. Perhaps that's the most fitting ending for a man who spent his professional life making fictional relationships feel real. In his personal life, he finally found a relationship that needs no performance, no audience, and no applause. Just two people, growing old together, far from the cameras that once defined his world.